Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is a pro-revenge story. My neighbor from a couple of doors down and I had a long-running feud. It all started when his dog came into my backyard and my dog attacked it. I was nearby and able to call my dog off before it got serious, but the other dog had a couple of bite wounds. The neighbor wanted me to pay the vet bill. When he threatened me with a lawsuit, I offered to pay half, even though I owed him nothing. It was his dog that was off the leash and in my yard after all. He declined the offer, took me to small claims court, and lost. The trial lasted all of 3 minutes when the judge found in my favor. That set in motion him starting to mess with me on a regular basis. My garbage cans would get knocked over every trash day. He would honk his horn and flip me off if he drove by my house. He tried to get my 10-year-old son arrested for riding another neighbor's mini bike. Never called the cops on their kids, just mine. It was all stupid petty crap. But it was a lot of stupid petty crap, and we were growing frustrated and mildly concerned about what he might do. We eventually grew tired of it and filed a restraining order against him. We dropped the legal case against him when we received a letter from his lawyer stating that he would refrain from any sort of contact with any of my family for a period of 2 years. Things settled down at that point, but I was not yet satisfied. I had been staying on the high road through all of this, not responding to any of his shenanigans in any way. I had a desire to get revenge but never acted on it. Then one day, I hatched my plan of evil genius. I was in the hardware store and I noticed some Japanese beetle traps. These traps are just a plastic bag with a scent pack. The beetles are drawn to the scent, fall in the bag, and can't get out. They also sold refill packages of the scent packs only, 4 per package. My neighbor has a very large rose garden in his front lawn. It is his pride and joy. Japanese beetles love roses. So I bought 4 packages of the refill packs. The scent pack is a waxy substance in a shallow plastic cup. I put the packs in the freezer overnight to allow me to pull the wax out easily. The next morning I woke up at 3 a.m. I popped the wax squares out of their cups and put them in a baggie. Then I crept over to my neighbor's house and spread the wax squares in the mulch under his rose garden, covering them from view with a bit of the hardwood mulch. That day was a hot one. By 11 a.m. it was north of 90 degrees F. I figured the wax had probably melted into the dark mulch. Also, by 11 a.m., the Japanese beetles were starting to arrive at my neighbor's roses. I went on a bike ride later in the evening and could see a small swarm of them attacking the roses. My neighbor had not yet noticed what was happening. By noon the next day, there was a freaking cloud of them. There had to be hundreds, if not thousands. My neighbor noticed. That afternoon I could see him spraying them and spreading 7 powder and waving his arms in the air in frustration. By the 3rd day, there were thousands of beetles, if not tens of thousands. They were everywhere in his front lawn and wreaking havoc on his roses. By the end of the 4th day, there was nothing left of his rose garden, other than a few tattered leaves and the thorny stalk. And that was it. The deed was done, and I was satisfied and laughing quietly to myself, but laughing and laughing. And I never told a soul what I did, not even my wife. This was a few years ago, and his rose garden is fully recovered now. And it will stay beautiful so long as he keeps being a quiet neighbor. Looking back, I realized that what I did was not right. Revenge is not the answer, and it only leads to more problems. I should have found a way to settle the dispute amicably instead of resorting to revenge. However, I also learned that sometimes the best revenge is living well and being happy. My neighbor may have won the battle, but I won the war. My family and I are still living in the same house, enjoying our peaceful life, while my neighbor is still struggling with his roses. I hope that one day he will learn to let go of the past and move on. But until then, I will continue to live my life and enjoy every moment of it. The next one is an entitled people story. It was just another day at the military base, but something was off. I could sense it, even though I couldn't pinpoint what it was. And then, the call came. It was my wife, and she was crying. I was immediately on edge, wondering what could have gone so wrong. She told me that our house had been foreclosed on and sold for a measly $1,350, all because she missed 2 HOA payments. I was in complete disbelief. How could this happen? We had 4 children under the age of 7, and we had poured all our savings into buying that beautiful family home just 4 years ago. I had to act quickly. I put in an emergency request to return home, and before I knew it, I was on a plane back home to sort this mess out. When I got home, my wife was packing up our belongings into boxes, her face streaked with tears. I hugged her tightly and promised her that we would find a way to fix this. I was furious when I read the paperwork that detailed the sale of our home. All of this over just $1,100 in missed payments. How could the HOA do this to us? I immediately began searching for a lawyer to help us, but it wasn't easy. The HOA held all the power in our state, and most lawyers didn't want to touch these cases. But we finally found someone who was willing to help us. The lawyer pointed out that the Service Members Civil Relief Act could protect us, as I was deployed overseas at the time of the sale. We took the HOA to court, and the judge ultimately ruled in our favor. We were ecstatic to get our home back, but the HOA continued to be a thorn in our side. They nitpicked every little thing, making our lives more difficult than they needed to be. And then, one day, we received a shocking update. The HOA had been embezzling funds from its residents, and it had finally been exposed. The HOA was in shambles, and we couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. After everything they put us through, it was gratifying to see them get what was coming to them. And as for us, we continued to live happily in our home, grateful for the protections afforded to us by the Service Members Civil Relief Act. But the story didn't end there. One day we received an unexpected letter in the mail. It was from the company that had bought our home for $1,350. They were now being sued for fraud, and they needed our help. It turns out that they had misrepresented the sale to the court, claiming that they had bought the home for $150,000 instead of $1,350. They were now facing a hefty lawsuit, and they needed our testimony to prove that they had indeed bought the home for the lower amount. We were hesitant at first, but our lawyer advised us that it was the right thing to do. We agreed to testify, and when the trial came around, we were there to provide our evidence. The trial was intense, with lawyers shouting and arguing back and forth. But in the end, justice prevailed. The company was found guilty of fraud, and they were ordered to pay us and the HOA restitution for their deceitful actions. It was a satisfying end to the whole ordeal. We had our home back, and we had helped bring justice to those who had tried to take advantage of us. It was a huge relief for us, and we could finally put this nightmare behind us. We were grateful for the support of our lawyer, family, and friends throughout this entire process. As we settled back into our home, we made sure to keep up with our HOA dues to avoid any future issues. We also made a point to spread awareness about the Service Members Civil Relief Act and the protections it provides for military families. Looking back on this experience, it's clear that the HOA's actions were unjust and unacceptable. But through our perseverance and the support of others, we were able to fight back and come out on top. We were proud to have stood up for our rights and to have helped bring justice to those who tried to take advantage of us. As for our family, we were finally able to move on and enjoy our beautiful home once again, grateful for the small things in life that truly matter. The next one is a petty revenge story. So back in June, I left a very toxic workplace of 8 years. I mainly left due to having a breakdown from being overworked. But this one particular person made working there even worse on top of the excessive work. This guy was 1 year younger than me. He was a 30-year-old man, the type of guy that appears to have peaked in secondary school. Very jock-like mentality and childish too. He was part of my team of 4. I was civil with him just because I had to work with him, but he was my workplace bully. Apart from just the general workplace banter, this guy, let's call him Chris, was relentless with his teasing. What would usually be classified as playful always pushed to bullying from him because he never knew when to quit. And if he noticed you were getting stressed or annoyed, he'd use you as a target of his teasing for the rest of the day. He would be super nice to you when it's just the two of you, but as soon as he has an audience, he picks his victim and will tease them constantly in what he would call playful. And if you ever got annoyed and stood up for yourself, he'd say he's only messing and make out like he's the victim. He's that type of person. One specific thing that he absolutely lost any respect I had for him was when I was still working there, some ex-employee wrote a very aggressive and angry review on Glassdoor about the company. Just because this person used a phrase that I use, Chris thought the review was me. As much as I proved that it wasn't me, didn't even have a Glassdoor account at the time. He was relentless with campaigning around the office that I was the one that wrote it. I also believe he told the boss that I was the one that wrote it once I left, and that's why I didn't get any freelance work from them afterward. So after I left my workplace, my old team still has a group WhatsApp that I'm a part of, and we still talk almost every other day on it. After I left, the group chat went a bit quiet. I assumed they made a new one of just them, which is fair, but the chat still kept going occasionally. I unfollowed and unfriended Chris on Facebook and Instagram because I just didn't want to be associated with him anymore. In the middle of the group chat, he broadcasts, "Why did you unfollow and unfriend me on Facebook?" whilst also at mentioning me. He wrote this message at 6:30 a.m. I woke up to this message broadcasted in the group chat. It pissed me off, so I was honest and said that he's a bully, and instead of making a big thing of it, I'd rather just remove him from the equation. I also said that it was immature of him to do this over the group chat and not in private. He didn't say anything, he just left the group chat and blocked me on everything. The group chat pretty much died after that. I was at the time livid. This 30-year-old man set fire to the group chat, saw what I said, and then ran off. I thought it must be a blessing in disguise because I finally got to say what I wanted to him, and I now don't have to acknowledge him again. But I was wrong. Skip to 3 months later, my husband and I were walking through town and stopping off at a pub to get some grub. And lo and behold, I see Chris there with a new girl I hadn't seen before. I was feeling extra confident and decided to approach him. I went up to him and said, "Hey, Chris, long time no see," with a big grin on my face. Chris looked like a deer in headlights with perfect red cheeks. I asked him, "How are things? You doing well?" He replied in a very normal way, clearly not wanting the conversation to continue and looking awkward as duck in front of his new girl. She asked how we knew each other. I generously waited for Chris to say, "We used to work together." So I added, "Yeah, it's quite funny, really. Chris used to be my workplace bully. He's the reason why I struggled financially after I left my old job because he accused me of writing a hostile review of the company, which I proved I didn't do, and lost me a lot of freelance work because of it." He was gobsmacked, with a face redder than a traffic light. The new girl clearly looked confused and uncomfortable. Neither of them responded. I didn't want it to carry on much longer as it wasn't really fair on her, but just to add salt to the wound, I said, "So, is this your new girlfriend, Catherine? Or is this Georgia? What happened with Sarah since someone said you were still with her last week?" All of those are completely true. He gets around. This girl went from confused to angry in the blink of an eye and just stared at Chris. I just said, "Oh, whoops, I really put my foot in my mouth, haven't I? I better go. It was nice seeing you again, Chris," and walked off. My husband, while he felt bad for the girl, which I did too, but to be fair, I might have saved her from inevitably being dumped by him a few weeks later when he gets bored of her, was very proud that I finally got my closure revenge on him. It feels amazing. Like, I feel petty as duck, but it felt good for there to finally be some consequences for this Chris guy being a dick. The next one is an entitled People Story. This happened on Friday night, and I've been struggling to put into words just how insane it was. My ex-in-laws and my ex showed up at my job during the biggest event of the year. Every year at my job there is a Christmas-themed party. The dancers dress up as sexy elves, my boss dresses up as Santa, the bartenders dress up as reindeer, and the bouncers dress up as snowmen. The place is beautifully decorated as a winter wonderland with a huge throne for my boss to sit on and custom poles for the dancers to dance around him. It's a huge thing at my job and is always one of the highest grossing nights of the year. It's advertised all over town that people can come, get their pictures taken with us, sit on Santa's lap, and enjoy a fun evening with custom Christmas music made by a DJ. We even have Christmas-themed drinks, guys. And they are so good. I was so excited for it because I started working there this year, so it was my first time being part of this event. I was dancing that evening, so I was dressed up as a sexy elf. I was feeling great. It was pretty late into the evening, around midnight, when this incident took place. I was dancing on stage when out of nowhere I heard the shrieking sound of my ex-Mill crying. I turned around and there they were. Ex-Mill, ex-Phil, and Bill. Ex-Mill was slapping at Bill's arm and pointing at me. I couldn't make out what she was saying over the music. All I could hear was the shrill sound of her voice. I started looking around for Kyle, my boyfriend. I couldn't see him, but I did see other bouncers, so I waved at them, trying to get their attention. We have a special wave that when a bouncer sees it, they know to come running. Bill comes to the stage and starts shouting at me while the men around him were waving cash at me. He tells me to come down and to come with him,
that I was bringing shame to his family. I ignored him. I saw a couple of bouncers heading for us, so I kept dancing, believing I was saved. That was the protocol. Call the bouncer and keep working to avoid making a scene. It was then I felt someone grab my ankle and pull. In my panic, I fell and let out a scream. I looked up and it was Bill. He had pulled himself onto the stage and grabbed me. I started kicking at him with my other foot until the bouncers finally got there and pulled him away from me. I felt someone else grab me and I screamed again, but when I looked up, I saw it was Kyle. Bill and my ex-in-laws were taken into the office while I was taken backstage to ride out the panic attack. Kyle held me until I calmed down. The police were called, and I got to watch as Bill was forced into the back of a police cruiser in handcuffs. He's being charged with public disturbance, assault, and trespassing. My boss was talking to my ex-in-laws, telling them not to come back and warned them the police would be called if they did. Despite how pissed he was, my boss was pretty calm and polite. I then heard ex-Mill shouting about how she was going to take me to court to take my children away from me because a godless whore like me wasn't fit to be a mother. I couldn't take hearing that, and I rushed at her. Kyle had to grab me and stop me, but I was screaming at her that she was a psychopath and would never get her hands on my kids again, that she had raised a lying, cheating, emotionally abusive scumbag. She raised a hand to slap me, but the bouncers and police got between us. She and ex-Phil got into their car and drove off after being threatened with arrest. After calm had been restored, we all went back inside and resumed the party. I made good money that night. Even Samantha, my job's entitled gossip, couldn't deny what Bill and my ex-in-laws did was crazy. Over the weekend, I got a call from someone claiming to be Bill's ex-girlfriend, the one he cheated on me with. I asked her how she got my number, and she said she had her ways. She said she decided to call me after Bill called her begging to get bailed out. She told me that during their relationship, ex-Mill treated her like crap and compared me and her a lot and always acted like she wasn't good enough. She was relieved when they went to Greece, believing her and Bill's relationship could be salvaged at that point. But she was wrong.
Bill would also talk about me a lot, and she was always crying about being compared to his ex. When I got the job at the club, his behavior became more erratic. She told me that she confronted him after he was thrown out of the club because word travels fast, and she heard about the whole thing. He got pissed and slapped her, then threw her out of his house. She got him arrested, and he was fired from his job as a result. I thanked her for the information and promptly told her never to call me again. She asked me why, and I told her that she had no issue cheating with Bill and hurting his wife and kids, and that she was only calling me to get back at him for what he's done to her. I hung up and blocked her. I plan to go file for a restraining order today, but now I am armed with more information that will make the process so much easier and go so much faster. Win for me. Merry Christmas, everyone. The next one is an entitled parent story. My mom and I immigrated to the U.S. in 1997. She met my stepdad through an international dating service. My life in America was never hard, so to speak. My mom always told my sister and me that times were tough while growing up. But as a kid, I never knew what it meant. My childhood was filled with the word no. As a kid, you're going to want toys and to go do things with friends. My mom always said no, and if I asked my stepdad, all he would say was, "Go ask your mama," which always led to a no. Now I'll say this, I was never starved. I was given what I needed growing up, but it was always bottom of the barrel. I remember asking my mom for a pair of Nikes once, and I mean once. They were $65.99 and my mom looked at me and said, "You're so greedy. You are so ungrateful for what you have. Your family back home could never afford nice shoes like that. Don't ever ask me for shoes like that again." Until I got my first job, I wore Walmart and Kmart clothes. My mom drilled into my head that me asking for things that any kid would ask for was wrong. The family back home had it so bad that I would be doing them an injustice for having clothes or toys or video games when they couldn't. A side note that is important. When I came to America initially, my mom and stepdad did not want me to start school a year late, so I brain dumped Spanish and learned English. It was not until last year, 2022, that I really started taking the initiative to learn Spanish. Another side note about my parents. They have separate bank accounts. My stepdad claims that his money is his and my mom's money is hers. This will become relevant. Also, my mom would never pay for a ticket for me to visit our home country because she said it was too expensive, and I didn't speak Spanish anyway. I got to the point where I was very fluent in conversational Spanish. My original plan was to surprise my mom. I practiced by getting in touch with family members back in our home country. I was talking to one of my cousins and I asked her how her day was. She said it was okay, but she was waiting for the wire from my mom. At first I thought that was some sort of slang that I was not familiar with, so I asked her to clarify what she meant. She then told me that she was waiting for my mom to send $800 down to them, and they were waiting at a Western Union for her MoneyGram to come in. At first I was thinking something was wrong, so I offered to help. My cousin said no, and when I asked again if something was wrong, my cousin said no. Then I asked how long my mom had been sending money. She said since 1999. I asked her if it was always $800, and my cousin explained that every month was a little different, but it's always been around $600 a month. I said all right and called my mom. I told her that our cousin told me about the money she'd been sending down there every month since 1999. She said, "Yeah, it's for your grandmother's medicines." I called her out. "No, it's not. You send them money because you feel guilty about living in America and they can't. So you send them money every month, and they spend it on the same things you have told me I wasn't allowed to have because I was GREED." I told her that during that conversation, I asked my cousin what type of clothes and shoes they wear. They said all the name brands that I was never allowed to look at. They took vacations on my mom's dime to Brazil, Peru, and Puerto Rico, while I missed every single school field trip that required money. I got a job at 14 so I could help with groceries and buy my own clothes because I felt that I was costing my mom too much money. I explained that according to them, she would send at least $600 a month down there. That would mean she has sent over $170K. I told her she could have helped me and my sister get through college, but instead, we had to take the student loan route. I asked her this question. Is the reason you never bought me and my sister tickets to go visit because you didn't want us to see the truth? Her reply, I brought you to America. You had it better than all of them. You're just ungrateful. I said, no, I just don't feel guilty about being here. If they really wanted to come here, they should have used the $170K you sent them. If you have made it this far, you might be wondering where my stepdad is in all this. His belief is, if the conversation is about money that is not his, then it's not his problem. It was never about the clothes or the shoes. I just felt so betrayed because I wanted to experience what other kids around me experienced, not everything, but some things. As a kid, I was made to feel terrible for wanting anything because I supposedly had it better. I handed my mom my paychecks for years thinking times were just too tough, just to find out that I had nothing to feel guilty about. I feel like my childhood was taken away from me because I wanted all the things a normal kid asked for. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.